Hello, everyone, and welcome to Hit and Hustle from IrishSportsDaily.com. I'm your host, Greg Flamong, and with me, as always, is Jamie Uyama, Mr. Jamie University. It is Thursday, February 20th. We've got a mailbag show. Opened up the mailbag yesterday for Irish Sports Daily subscribers, and we've got a lot of fun questions. We're going to talk Notre Dame football. We're going to talk whether this team is going to be better than 2024. We're going to talk about Kenny Minchey. We're going to talk about, is Marcus Freeman even a good defensive coordinator? Taking shots at Notre Dame's head coach, just a passive aggressive.
I don't think that. I think that question was more of like they don't. No shots at ISD subscribers, but I think there's a lot of people who kind of really don't.
I think that
there's a lot of people. It's funny because there's a lot of people who pay to have insider information and learn more about the team, but are casuals, so. I took that as a very I'm a casual.
I thought it was kind of a non sequitur. Like I was like, I don't know how actually whether him being a good defensive coordinator fits in to the rest of the question. We'll get to it. It's not a big deal. Matthew Bolden not taking shots. It's all good. I didn't know what you're actually getting at. So, but we'll get to the question. We answer all the questions as always. Thank you everyone for tuning in today. If you like what you hear, please hit the like button. Please hit subscribe. Please hit the notification bell so whenever it is we go live. Links to the podcast are in the description below. And as always, the show is brought to you by ESQ Clothing, founded by Notre Dame alum Ge Wang. You see ESQ on all your favorite Notre Dame players and coaches with over a decade making the best custom clothing available. ESQ will help you look and feel your best in 2025, from a perfect fitting suit or sport coat, shirts or bomber jacket, perfect tuxedo for wedding season. Check out Ge's amazing work at esqclothing.com. Book an appointment to upgrade your wardrobe today. Mention ISD. Get 10% off your entire purchase. Jamie, I decided to be a good podcaster. Wrote down the new address for the ESQ shop that they're opening up on 1085 Gage Street in Winnetka, Illinois. Very excited about that. Ge's expanding, which is befitting of the type of clothes that he is putting out there for the people, dressing people. It's very befitting because he is fitting you the proper way. 1085 Gage Street in Winnetka, Illinois. All right. As many people pointed out, Jamie's wearing his Canada sweatshirt. Big game tonight.
Gotta represent. Yeah, exactly.
The Canadian hockey team versus U.S. hockey team. It's big. Look, it's a big event, and that's exciting, right? It's honestly, it's fun just to get involved in a sporting event that's like heavily contested and that sort of thing. So look,
it's Jamie, fun. Just like the Olympics are fun. All that.
Jamie roots for the Canadians. We will root for the Americans. We are American. I'm an American boy. And that's all good. Before we get to the questions, I do want to I want to talk some basketball. I want to talk to the Notre Dame women's basketball team, ranked number 1 in the country. I believe it's 18 straight wins. They another nice victory against Duke last week. They have a game tonight, or not last week, on Tuesday. And they have a game tonight as well.
Great third quarter.
Listen, Notre Dame, their basketball team, the women's basketball team.
Yeah, let's make a distinction here. The women's basketball team.
We need to make sure we point that out. The women's basketball team. They are just they are the thing that we see in college football a lot, where it's just that the talent is kind of overwhelming at times, and that's what it is. They just overwhelm teams if they start off slow. Like Liza Carlin had some. She couldn't make a layup for whatever reason against Duke. She had a lot of little bunnies. They call them bunnies. She had a lot of those opportunities that barely coming off the rim, and they had a big run at the start of the third quarter. Suddenly it's 46-28, and they run away with it. And it's just like, if Hannah isn't shooting the ball great, you get contributions from Olivia Miles, you get contributions from Sonia Citron. You get kind of contributions from Maddie Westbeld. Maddie Westbeld is just a problem. She can score multiple ways.
Great.
She can put the ball on the ground. She can hit a pull-up three. She can hit a three in transition. She can pass. You can give it to her on the elbow, and she can play make from there. She's a big problem. Leah Tu King is inside doing things. It's just They have everything that you want. They can win any kind of way that you need to win a basketball game. And that is basically not just basketball, but any sport. If you can win multiple ways against the best competition, I mean, that's what you want, right? Like that's everything you want from a basketball team, from any team, and they're number one in the nation. They look amazing. They've got some of the best wins in college basketball. Went to USC and won by double digits. Went to UConn, won by double digits. They're crossing all the boxes.
UConn came to them.
UConn came here. That's right. UConn
yeah, last year they won at UConn.
Still won by double digits though. Checking all the boxes. They're a joy, Jamie. They're an absolute joy. Any comment from you on the women's basketball team?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, I think if people aren't watching the Notre Dame's women's basketball team, I think they should. Like, I think it's just good basketball. Like, it is absolutely because of the depth and because of like what you said, all the different options they have. It's like fun. Like you would think that. I mean, Hannah Hidalgo can easily be like just like an ISO player, and I thought last year she was way more of an ISO player. I mean, the team was different, right? And obviously, so I think that played a part in it. But and then when she was off, like she was last year, in the tournament when they lost, right? So now, yeah, like you said, they don't have to be like that, and they're just a really good basketball team, and I just think there's the way that they can kind of come at you in waves, the way that obviously they can get out in transition, the way they play defense. Sony Citroen, especially too, like just doesn't get enough credit for what a great defender she is, and I love watching them. So I mean, I seriously, anytime that I get a chance, I try to watch every game possible. And I think if people, if you want to kind of forget how bad Notre Dame's men's basketball team is, watch the women's team. They're great. Very easy to root for.
Yeah. Raymond Horton asked Miami next. Yeah, they're at Miami tonight, 7 Eastern time on ACC Network. So check them out. They're playing former Notre Dame women's basketball player Natalia Marshall. She's playing big minutes for Miami this year. It's one of those things for her. Like, you got a roster this loaded, you got to go somewhere where you can play big minutes, And they're getting contributions from Cass Prosper as well, and Kate Koval's coming off the bench. When you have those caliber players coming off the bench for you, that's when you know you're in a good place with your program. Same with Liza Carlin. So the men's basketball team is in the opposite. So there's the spectrum of it. Here's the women and here's the men. I think they had the worst home loss that they've had in like a really long time. Lost 97-73 last night. Listen, Micah Shrewsbury had his little rant that came out of nowhere. That was complete straw man from what the question was. Jack Sobel from BGI asked him what's kind of been going wrong in the last 5 games, and he yelled at, not necessarily Jack. I don't think he went in on Jack for his question, but he just went in on like, don't give up on the players, and people want him fired, and it's just like, look, listen, it's not good basketball. He's like hitting mics. Yeah, what's going on? Like, figure that. I don't have confidence you can figure this out when you're going on rants like that in a press conference. Pretty innocuous question. Wasn't any sort of implication or anything.
Wasn't it all related to his answer? That's for sure. Yeah.
The question was, what has gone wrong in the last 5 games? Because they went from 10-10 to 11-14. So obviously they went 1-4 over the next 5. And the actual response to the question was, I don't know, man. Like, that was what he said. And then he went in on the rant. And it's like, okay, well, it's not good. So,
yeah.
So they had another bad loss. They say it's rock bottom. We'll see. Can always get worse, as we've seen in the past.
Yeah.
So, all right, let's get to the questions. Listener questions on our mailbag show. We'll start out with S. Rock. How sophisticated was the offense that was run at Pope John Paul II when Kenny Minchey was there? It has been said several times that Minchey has the best arm strength of the 3 returning quarterbacks. What are the potential factors that could limit Minchey in his quest to be Notre Dame's starting quarterback?
I mean, I couldn't say exactly how sophisticated it was. I'll just say, like, on film, you saw him make throws. You saw him make all the kind of throws that you'd want to see, like in terms of like layering the ball over the middle
Yeah.
and making throws with touch and doing different things where it wasn't just like, hey, I'm running RPOs and throwing screens or throwing a slant, or RPOs and throwing slants, or I'm throwing the go ball, right?
Yeah.
That's not what the offense was. So I don't really know how it's. I kind of was confused a little bit by this because he's been in Notre Dame's program for 2 years. It's not like he's like the freshman coming in. It's not like that part of it. He's had 2 years to learn, Notre Dame's offense, and honestly, 1 year really with Mike Denbrock's offense, right? So, in terms of what he knew before and what he, and what he did then, that baseline, it's like you kind of have to be once you're 2 years into a program, it's either you're like you are caught up mentally or you are toast, really, because you just can't be like that as a quarterback. Then you can't play, right? So, but I don't think that has ever been a question with him in like terms of like learning the offense or whatever. He does have like, I would say you just see him make throws, and I think all those guys have good arms. Like I think you see Angeli make some big time throws. Carr has a really, really good arm. Minchey, I just think the ball just comes out a little bit different with him. Like he just got a little bit more zip. But I certainly don't think that anyone else. I think all three of those guys have better arms than Riley Leonard, in my opinion. When you see them throw in person, you can see that. I think the things that would limit Minchey are where his consistency within the offense and what you see, because like when you see him make like fantastic plays in terms of like escaping pressure, going and making a run like that. You're like, wow, I don't know if any of these other guys can exactly do that, make that athletic of a play. Maybe Carr can do some of that, but maybe not quite at the level. I think it's like, with him and like any kind of quarterback who hasn't played, it's like processing things fast enough to say like, ball's out now, right? Ball's out now. I got to get the ball then. And then with him, and this is just something because we only see what we see with him in terms of reps. He doesn't get too many reps that we've seen as media members over the course of the last 2 years. You get a limited amount of number, right?
Yeah.
But what we've seen from him is he will make throws and make really, really impressive throws. And then we'll hear like someone like Gino Guidugli, like Notre Dame's quarterback coach, talk about how he has the confidence to make throws into tight windows, which is great. But sometimes he's got to know, don't make that throw, right? So ultimately, when we're looking at, and something I wrote about in Six Thoughts today too, part of the value is like, hey, you can make that throw. Well, obviously that's added value, but you got to make it at the right time. You got to know when to make that throw, because if you put the ball in danger there, or you take a sack, or you do whatever, I mean, that's taking value away, right? And putting Notre Dame in a bad spot. And part of the thing that Riley Leonard did so well is he avoided so many mistakes.
Yeah.
Right. And so that's going to be like the question with him. And I mean, it's a question with all of those guys, so it's not different, but that is probably the biggest factor with Minchey.
Yeah. And you said like make the throw at the right time. Like it can't be, hey man, like you force this ball into this space, we'll just throw it over here. Like your read should have taken you over here. Like that's when you get in trouble with the coaches. Yeah. If you fit it in a spot where it's like, we need you to try to fit that in, we need you to try, like, then it's okay. Right. Then it's fine. And they don't get all upset about that. But when it's like, hey man, why are you trying to fit in this dig where you could just throw this flare route here? Like that's right there. We've told you that it's okay to throw this ball and you're still fitting it in. That's where it is. And I think for him, it's just like, I talk about this with quarterbacks a lot, where it's like knowing where to go with the ball all the time. You got to know where the ball's got, where the ball should be going on a certain coverage with a certain look and a certain route concept. Right. And Riley Leonard struggled with that, to some extent a little bit, especially early in the year. And like Angeli, I think is less so this way. Like I think Angeli, for the most part, and this is probably why, like, this is one of his greatest strengths, actually, and why, like, he can be a viable player to be the starter, is like he generally knows exactly where the play should go and where where they want to throw it. And he's accurate, right? We've talked about the mobility stuff, and we've talked about the mobility stuff and the sack avoidance and all those other things. But like, that's the thing that he does really well. And Minchey, like, I think for Kenny Minchey, in terms of like how to win this job or whatever, he's got to find a way to beat out Angeli, right? Like Carr, for me, is just like, Minchey cannot worry about him. He's got to think, how do I beat out Angeli as the number 2 guy and then the number 1, right? Because Angeli's been above him this entire time. He's a little bit older, so that makes sense. But like, how do I add value that's ahead of the guy that's ahead of me? Right. And that is playmaking. Right. But it's also like, you also have to be good at the things that he is good at. Right. And that is knowing where to go with the ball and things of that nature. As far as his arm, like, he's like Everett Golson to me, like closest to kind of Everett Golson and the type of arm that Golson had.
I think that's
just
good.
Like super live arm. Like, just, man, when he throws it, that looks nice. It looks good. And I think that's why everyone is kind of, it's very much like Kenny Minchey. A lot of people, he's on a lot of people's mind. And I think it's because of that. It's just the way that the ball comes out of his arm. It's just kind of aesthetically pleasing. So, look, I don't have a problem with that. Right. Like, it'll be interesting to see if he can figure these things out. ND Philly 32. I wonder if ND Philly's having a good time right now with the Eagles.
I'm sure he enjoyed the Super Bowl. Yeah,
I'm sure he did. Am I crazy to think that next year's team will be even better than this past year's? Outside of quarterback, interior D-line, and safety. It's pretty important. Outside of 3 of the most important positions on the field. Outside of quarterback, interior D-line, and safety, it seems like we upgraded every single position. I understand that leadership and culture play a big role in how a team performs, and that quarterback is the most important position on the field. But how do you feel this team stacks up against last year? I don't think they are getting as much credit as they deserve.
Well, I mean, I think they're getting plenty of credit. Like,
it's hard. I mean, it's preseason. What kind of credit?
Yeah, I mean, I think they're getting plenty of credit, like, in terms of how it's viewed. Like, they are. When I've looked at way too early top 25s, which I think are, I mean, they're pretty useless, but I'm just saying
they're way
from that perspective of how, national people view them, Notre Dame is like 5th, pretty much, where they're a top 5 team, like,
which makes sense given a quarterback question.
Absolutely. Right. And, one thing though, if you look at like the top 10 in F+ last year, 8 of the top 10 have new quarterbacks. So it's like, they're not the only team that needs quarterback. And certainly, well, yes, those are questions and those are important positions, but they have probably less questions than a lot of teams, right? So, which is why they're our top 5. But if you want to say, well, they should be top 3 or they should be top 2 or whatever, really, who cares? Because you got to go out and play and whatever. So it doesn't matter. Ultimately, where they're ranked or how they're viewed now. Obviously, it's going to matter. Like, if they go out and beat Texas A&M, if they go out and beat Texas A&M or Miami and Texas A&M to start the season, Notre Dame is going to be in the top 5, like, or the top 3 or whatever. They're going to be. They've kind of set themselves up to be that if that's what happens, right? So, I think culture-wise too, they have so many of these guys that experience like that last year, that when they talk about and they don't need like which is another reason why that's why it's hard to say like they're going to perform worse than they did last year. When that culture remains, like, they're still going to be a very, very good team. Like, they're going to be a very good team, and there's a reason why they should absolutely be in the playoff, and also like be like a contender again, because they're set up really, really well. Like they return so much on defense. The offense has a chance to be better than it was last year. And we'll see about these questions about them, because they're not going to have somebody who's just going to be like step in and be Xavier Watts, just like how when Kyle Hamilton left, they didn't have someone who was exactly Kyle Hamilton, right? Like it's not going to happen like that, but it's all about like kind of the collective and what they can do to replace some of these guys. And it's also the same thing with quarterback, right? Like the quarterback might not be exactly what Riley Leonard was at the end of last year in the beginning of the season, but now they have more of the team there to kind of set themselves up to kind of help carry that quarterback while he kind of gets his feet wet and makes that adjustment. Where, this past year, like they really desperately needed Riley Leonard, especially early in the year against Texas A&M. I just think if Steve Angeli's probably starting that game, they're probably losing, just because they needed what Riley provided in terms of his mobility, his ability to avoid sacks and all that kind of stuff. Right. And that was important. And his like experience there. And now you have kind of more guys who have that experience around that quarterback. So I think if it's Notre Dame fans not giving them enough credit, or national, I think nationally they are getting a pretty decent amount of credit. So I don't know. I mean, how do you see it, Greg?
I think, okay, I'm just thinking, I don't know about the credit piece. Because maybe that's true. Maybe the Andy Philly is watching like shows that are, discounting them.
Oh yeah.
I don't know.
I'm not watching like I'm not listening to the Cover 3 pod right now.
I think this team, as it relates to last year, I think there are some very big like positives for this team specifically. The line will be better. I think the fact that Notre Dame knows where they're going to get their yards from, like you can count on like Greathouse and Faison, and I think you can be pretty confident in Malachi Fields, right? Like it just, again, if he was a returning player with the numbers that he just had, you'd be pretty confident. It's like, okay, Notre Dame's going to have a nice receiving core, right? And then Eli Raridan's a good player, and then you have your backs too, like Jeremiah Levin. Like they might be like two of the best backs in the country, like the best tandems in the country, right? Like you're talking about like Notre Dame and Penn State, which is like whatever, order them however you want, doesn't matter to me. The fact that they know where they're going to get offense from is like really important. Like they didn't at this time last year, they really did not. They like, how is this actually going to work offensively? Like Riley Leonard didn't even practice with them until the fall. So the thing on defense that I don't want to say concerned about, I'm curious to see is like, I think we harped on a lot about how organized they were in the back, and they just didn't give up explosives that often. And like in losing Xavier Watts, like it's not just a skill set thing. It's just the fact that, man, he was in such command back there. And through all of the injuries and everything, he never was off the field ever. He was always out there, and they always had that guy kind of in control of everything that they were doing, and that's gone. And as good as Adon Schuler can be, and maybe he can pick that up, right? Like maybe he's ready to kind of carry that mantle. Whether Stroman can come in and be what Adon Schuler was, and Adon Schuler can be, like, that remains to be seen. I love the talent itself. You feel good about. You feel good about Leonard Moore. You feel good about Christian Gray. You feel good about Devontae Smith, right? So that from a talent standpoint, I think they're just fine, like on paper. Linebacker, I feel like will be better than last year, just because those young players. What's going out is Jack Kaiser, who I don't want to undersell at all, but like KVA is coming into his own now. You have Jaden Osbury coming in his own. Jalen Sneed, who continues to get better and better. You have Drake Bowen, who's going to be a better player. And then you add someone like Madden Faremo, who can do the KVA thing last year. I think the defensive ends will be better. And so because of all that, I think on the interior, I think they'll be okay. They won't be as good, obviously, as Cross and Mills. but they that doesn't mean they still can't be a very good, very, very, very good defense. The only thing I would say is like better than last year. Like they were really good last year, really, really good. We're talking top 5 in SP plus and offense and defense. Like I think to be as good is just fine. They played for the national title game.
Yeah,
it's kind of hard to be better, but it's just, can they maintain that level and, get better in areas where it's like maybe Christian Gray isn't giving up the deep ball like he was at the end of the year kind of thing. And that goes away, and then you can become better overall in that way. That's kind of how
I think that's totally fair. And I think that's all that kind of stuff is going to come into question of like, it's really the only way. I mean, the reason why I think people should be bullish on them is because you look at so many of the players there that are kind of expected to be, we went through that list, in the last podcast, you check it out if you didn't listen to it, but Daniel Jeremiah is like, the kind of foundation you need for a championship team. And there's so many players there that, we listed as like pass rushers, playmakers, offensive linemen, whatever. Right. And most of those guys are young, guys that are like, there's really no reason why they won't be better versions of themselves this year. Like, obviously it doesn't happen for everyone. There's some guys who don't take that step or take the leap that you think, but a lot of those guys will. And we've just seen it enough with this coaching staff in terms of how they develop guys. Right. So, and I think that's why, people should be kind of bullish on it, just how like the reason why I think like Christian Gray, and really there's definitely like questions about how kind of like he finished the season overall, but the reasons why people should be thinking that, man, this guy has a chance to still like be very, very good and a way better player than he was last year is because a guy like Cam Hart, and you looked at his progression, right? And Christian Gray already started this full year where he played so many snaps. Cam Hart didn't even play when he was at that same age, right? Like he wasn't, when it was his second year, his sophomore year, or his redshirt freshman year, he wasn't even playing. He wasn't even in the rotation at corner. So I think there's just a lot of reasons to be optimistic about what, Notre Dame could be. And I mean, that's why I'm excited about the season.
Yeah. Yes, I agree. Everyone should be excited about the season. CFB Hertz, do you anticipate fewer transfers, medical retirements after spring practice, since Notre Dame presumably will have 105 scholarships to work with?
I mean, I don't know if I'm still unclear about when the 105 is going to be official, when that's going to happen. But I'll say that, last year there weren't too many guys who transferred after spring. There were some guys who transferred kind of like, during the spring. It happened with a couple guys. And you could see that. But I think even if you look at, say the thing with like, everyone's like, well, I think JD Price is going to leave, right? Like he's going to leave after spring. It's like, I mean, maybe, but why wouldn't he have left just then? Because I don't think there's anything in the spring that's going to suggest like, oh, well, you're going to be de-emphasized in the spring. If anything, they're going to probably him and Jeremiah Love. I would say he's going to get pretty close to the same treatment as Jeremiah Love in terms of like, hey, we really don't want to give you too much wear and tear on you in the spring. And we're going to give these young backs more, run. I mean, it would make a lot more sense if Jabron Payne was someone who looked at it, because they were like, well, Aeneas Williams take my role. I'm not sure where I fit, whatever. And I'm not saying he will, but I'm just saying that would make a lot more sense there. Or if you're looking at, say, like Junior Tui Halamaka, right? Well, they're going to go through the spring and maybe he decides like, hey, I want to bounce. I'm not getting treated certain. Maybe I don't think so, but maybe. But the fact that he stayed now, and then they have Boubacar and Jordan Patel probably are going to not do anything during the spring. So it's like he's still going to get a ton of reps in the spring, like all these guys. So kind of how it worked out with a lot of these people that you would have put as candidates to maybe transfer out. I don't know if it really kind of makes sense. Like, I mean, it could be like young guys that are just unhappy. They don't see themselves a future, whatever. I mean, that happens all the time. So I'm not saying that can't happen, but I don't know. I kind of feel like a lot of the guys who kind of got out, like a Sam Pendleton would have been a perfect example of a guy who I think if they would have went through the spring and then he didn't see a future for him, he would have bounced. Yeah. You know, that would have been someone there who would have been like kind of on my radar. I don't know, like where I don't know where else some of these other ones are going to go in terms of whatever. And then some of these guys might, you know, maybe they do some, you know, medical stuff, but I can't think of guys off the top of my head. If I'm looking at like, when I was just looking, I went and looked at the roster of just like thinking of guys that were kind of like in the same kind of like Tyson Ford. Yeah. You know, I mean, there are a few guys that I could see. But I mean, I think most of those guys will just, they could do that and they'll just do that same thing. If they just don't think they're going to play at all. And I don't know. So I'm not sure if they're going to do that or not, but I guess it all depends on whether or not that 105 is like, if that is officially official.
Right? Yeah. I think to the question, I think you might see less guys like processed out because there's not like a crunch for 85. I think that might be but how much does it matter to the actual team? Like, I don't, that's where it's like, does it matter? Like, I don't know that if a guy who they'd normally process out because they want to free up a scholarship, they don't think he's going to play anyway. So whether this happens or whether it doesn't happen, it's good for the player in terms of like, you know, they don't have to be put in that position where it's like, I want to play football somewhere and I want to be at Notre Dame. Like, they don't have to move on, right? And that's good for them. But for the actual football team, I don't know how much it matters on this to this front. The thing you have to worry about in the spring is like if someone, you know, some big school loses a back to injury for the year, and it's like, well, now we gotta throw some money at JD Price, right? Like that's the kind of thing you have to worry about. But then like he also has to take it, you know, he also has to say, no, I'm willing to go do that for the price that they're paying me. Notre Dame is also paying him as well. So, you know, but that's where you're vulnerable to something like that happening, someone getting hurt. Buddy Mitchell, thank you for the super chat. He asked, any word on new leaders stepping up during winter conditioning? I know it's early, but they lost a lot off of last year's team. It's a good question about leadership, just because that's a good question going into the next season. I think once they get to spring ball, usually Matt hears something and he'll kind of he usually puts out like a post like right before spring ball or during spring ball about like, hey, X guy is like emerging as a leader in the locker room. Like I remember Pat Coogan around this time was like, people were like, hey, he's really showing something. He's like really showing some leadership. I wouldn't be surprised if like Drake Bowen stepped up on that front. I wouldn't be surprised if you heard a Don Schuler step up on that front. I'm curious to hear like how much does Jeremiah Love want to push this? It's presumably his last season at Notre Dame. Does he want to be a captain? Like someone like him is in line to be a captain. Like, does he want to be that? Will he step up in that way? You know, so look, it'll be interesting to track throughout the time. But usually this is closer to practice actually starting, Jamie.
Yeah, well, and I think one of the things that you see with a lot of the guys that are, you know, going to be the lead guys for Notre Dame next year is these guys already have like a super high work ethic. Like they came to Notre Dame with like a super high work ethic. Like Jaden Greathouse, he's always going to be someone that, you know, he didn't need to look at the vets to be like, hey, you got to be like this guy to get that example. Like, so he should already be someone that, especially after, he had the 2 games that he had to finish the season, that any of like the young early enrollee guys should look at Jaden Greathouse and see how he works and be like, well, this is what I have to do to like be at this level. And, you mentioned Bowen and Schuler, 2 other guys, right? And those guys obviously learned from like Watts and from Bertrand and from Kaiser and so that's just, it's all there. And obviously too, like that was something like Mills grew into that at Notre Dame. And I think Burnham is someone like that, everything I've heard from about his work ethic and stuff too, like that's another guy who's become an older guy. And I think one thing too is this is a really good chance to, it's not specifically about this, but that's a really good chance for like Steve Angeli to really kind of like take charge and
or
do that.
One of them.
Yeah. And really too, because that is the one thing where if it's like a close race and one guy is already kind of like people are gravitating towards him like that, that's what you do. And it makes sense because he's going to go into his 4th year in the program, right? So he should be someone that like if he's not doing that as that thing, to me that is like a good indication he's not going to be the quarterback.
Yeah. Good point from the Yama. Loyal stepson asks, which of the outgoing players leaves the biggest hole to fill? I think it goes Watts, Leonard, and Cross.
They're all, Watts, I think he was just at such an incredibly high level. And I would say, Leonard, it's almost like quarterback, you kind of have to take it off the thing because it's just such an important position anyways, which you could probably say it would probably be him just by the nature of the position. But just taking that out of it, Watts would be there. And Cross and Mills too. I think both those guys, there specifically. And I think even just for like Cross, I know he didn't have the same season that he had the year before, but just to see a guy like go out and play, like basically hurt for 3/4 of the year, that is something that is like, that's hard to replicate because not all guys will be able to do that. Right. But I don't know. It's tough because you would say like, hey, Ben Morrison would have probably been on this list before, but then you're like, well, Leonard Moore just stepped right in and did that. So we'll see. Watts just, to me, it's just he stands like above everybody else because I just don't think that no matter who it is, who is that safety, who's going to start next to Schuler, they shouldn't be expected to be Xavier Watts.
Yeah.
Right. Just like, just like we said with Hamilton, just like you could say with like when Julian Love left and Troy Pride went to the Boundary, and I know we're got another question about the Boundary later, but like he shouldn't have been expected to be exactly Julian Love because they're not going to be exactly that. Everyone has to be who they are and just play your game and, hopefully elevate. But like, it's tough when you get those kind of players, those really like all-American superstar type of players. No one is going to be that direct person who's there, but now you have to see whether or not somebody else, and it may not be a safety, is going to be that next All-American. Maybe you get multiple All-Americans, right?
Yeah. Leonard's like 3,800 total yards. I think 38 total touchdowns on the season. That's out the door, right? Like that's hard to, replicate. But like you said, the quarterback's it's kind of hard to say. Watts is just, I think him, for sure him. He's just special. Like he's a special football player. Not even what he does. It's just like the leadership. And everyone knows they can count on him. He's never, like I said, he's never not in the game. He's always performing well. He's never having a bad game. Like when have you ever in the last 2 years been like, who had a bad game was Xavier Watts? Like he didn't have a great game. Like not like never. You never said that.
No, some bad plays here and there, but not. Not a
like
bad game.
he always makes up for them with like 5 good plays, like you just never said ever, maybe he didn't have a good game. He had a good game every single time. And it's just hard to lose that. Right.
Yeah. To lose that level of consistency. Because I mean, you look at it like Schuler, he had obviously some fantastic games, but then he had some other games where he wasn't as good.
Yeah.
But that's oh, sorry to,
well, just to like Xavier Watts, like in 23, 24, in 22, he had some rough moments, right? Like he definitely did.
It's progress and it's development and it's steps along the way, because it's so rare for anyone to come in and be like at that consistent level right away, which is like the same thing with the quarterback. People are going to expect that quarterback to come in and light the world on fire. And like, this guy won the job. Well, he better be this, and this right away. Chances are that guy is not going to maybe not struggle, but not be close to the player they are halfway through the season.
Yeah.
Like, it's just the same way. Like, if people recall, like CJ Stroud at Ohio State, he was someone that, like, the first 4 games of his first season starting, there were people like, he just kind of, I don't know, good. Like, he wasn't great. And then he just, all of a sudden, it clicked for him and he took off to another level. Yeah. And then from that point on, he was just like, well, this guy's going to be like, top 2 pick, blah, 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 blah. Like, he was going to be that level, and he just kept getting better and better. Yeah. And that's kind of the thing that, you hope for all of these guys, just like how Xavier Watts, even the one thing where after that USC game, and he was obviously, it's an all-time game from any Notre Dame defender. He just took it to another level because there was like a certain confidence that came with it afterwards. So I think a lot of that is just like, which is why, one of the reasons why I think of like Jordan Botelho, and health obviously is a question, but I think when you come into a season and you're playing like that at that level, and we'll see what if his body can get to back where he can do it, but he should come back a very confident player.
Yeah.
Like, he should be like, hey, this is what I can do. Right. And get back to that. And once you've done that and you've hit a certain level, it's really hard to not get, to not keep that, because you know what you can do.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. So I just, for this question, I'll say Watts, and that'll be it. And to your point about Botelho, that's something to track as well in his progress. And Traore, we got a question about Traore in just a second. From Drew Brennan, 77. Can you give us more of an overview on why one corner would be good at the field and why one corner would be good at the boundary? With Leonard Moore being so good overall, do you envision a future where he can play either and the coaches just make sure he is on the other team's best wide receiver no matter where he lines up?
Well, he did play field in the Louisville game, so that was the thing. And he's played both, and you've had different guys who have played both. And I think there's definitely been a lot of guys who were better at one thing. I mean, like Cam Hart, you look at him physically and you would say you would think from a physical perspective, he's friggin' huge. He's a massive dude. He looks like he's more of like a linebacker than an actual corner, just size-wise in a lot of ways. So he should be an ideal fit as a boundary, but he turned out he wasn't an ideal guy at the boundary. And part of that is because I think at the boundary, like, that is extremely physical. It's more physical in a way that when you're playing man, you're going to play a lot more press man than you would at the field. There's not too many times you're going to press to the field. It just doesn't happen very often. And you're also going to have to tackle a lot more frequently and be more involved in the run game. Teams love to run to the boundary, love to run zone to the boundary, love to leave that corner unblocked and say, hey, you have the corner, make this tackle. Because if you don't have a corner who can make that tackle, especially if it's like a 220, 230 pound back, they're just going to keep running it over and over again. Right. So, and that's why Julian Love, not the biggest guy, wasn't the biggest guy in terms of size and all that kind of stuff. He was fantastic there because he was another good guy at the field too. He was just, and obviously he's a, Pro Bowl safety in the NFL. He could play anywhere, but the reason why he was so good on the boundary was he could play physical with the receivers and he could also be physical as a tackler. He was a very, very good tackler. And I think that's one of the things too. And you kind of brought this up when I mentioned the thing about maybe Gray being better at boundary. And I think this was a really great point by you, Greg, where you talked about kind of his size. And that's one of the things where I want to know where he is in terms of his size, like what he weighs. Everybody gets obsessed with like Emil Wagner's weight. I'm really like, that is something I want to monitor, is Christian Gray's weight and how big he is, because I think he's obviously a naturally skinny guy. Some guys are always going to be like that. Some guys are not going to be 200 pounds, no matter if you're 6'2" or whatever. But you kind of need to, Leonard Moore, what we've seen from him is like, man, this dude is just like not afraid of that smoke. Like he just absolutely, he's an incredible tackler and a very, very good run defender. And that's why he's like, and then obviously he's long, he can match up with the bigger guys there. So that's why he's like a perfect fit there. Where Gray, and I would think one of the things why Moore is a better fit than him is because size-wise, I don't think he can tackle as well and handle that. I mean, he's certainly a willing tackler. I'm not saying he's soft by any means. Yeah. I'm just saying like he's not as big and fit as physical as a Moore.
Yeah. And you also get more of the back shoulder stuff, and you get more of like that kind of sideline go, which Christian Gray struggled with.
Yeah.
So, I mean, you kind of went over what you want in a boundary in a field and that sort of thing. For Christian Gray specifically, I do, a question for Mike Mickens is like, why do you think that Christian Gray struggled with that route specifically? Because he got outrun enough times to where it's like he is not a bad athlete and he's not slow. And like I've seen slower play, like I'll bet you he's as fast as Cam Hart is, or thereabouts, right?
Testing wise, he tested really well.
Yeah. So why is it like what is the disconnect there? Why does he keep? Is it a technique problem? Right? Is he sitting on things? Is he like, to me, when I watch him, it's like he relies too much on like being grabby. Like there's too much grabby, like trying to grab that shoulder pad. It got him in trouble a bunch. I mean, he got outrun, like he was beaten against Navy. They ran a go ball. They just threw the ball too far. On an interception he had against Miami of Ohio, like I thought he was beaten, and the quarterback wasn't good enough to, we talk about being able to throw to the field. I don't think the quarterback was good enough to have the arm to throw it over the top to the field, and he was able to intercept it. Georgia ran past him, right? Obviously, Ohio State ran past him. And look, these are exceptional players, right? So, but again, we're talking about this level of the sport. And so I'm just curious, like what Mike Mickens thinks there, because on every other kind of route, he's good to very good,
Yes.
And he's got a ton of ball production as well. And he's physical, and he's, he'll come up and support on the run. There's a fill play that he had against Penn State, which was really good. On like 3rd and 3, he stopped the 4th and 2 against USC when they tried to run a screen at him, and so the people there's just way too much like Christian Gray's bad. Like there's way too much within Notre Dame's community. He struggles with this one thing, and unfortunately, that one thing is, I talk about, with Cam Hart, I talked about loud misses. That Christian Gray has the loudest of misses, and it's like, how does Notre Dame get that fixed? Because I don't think it's a talent problem, and I don't think it's a skill problem. I think there's a technique issue that he has to get figured out. So we'll see where that goes, right? Like we're monitoring, and if there's a chance to ask Mike Mickens about it, I'd love for someone to.
Just quick on that too, because when I watched him and just over the course of the season and what we saw from him, I think one of the things with him was he played a lot to down and distance, trying to make plays on the ball.
Yeah.
And obviously, it's not a bad way to do it because you can make plays and be productive and get a lot of ball production that way. You don't want to be someone who's always giving up like the free access or like, especially no one wants to give up 3rd and 8 on an in-breaking route. Like no one wants to do that as a field corner, right? So, and he was tremendous in that, but like, I think some of it, and obviously Mickens would know, but just from my vantage, without knowing exactly all the calls and everything, I think some of it was him being a bit too aggressive and thinking like, hey, this is the down and distance, so this is what I'm expecting to get. So I'm playing that first and then just being too slow to react to what actually is happening. And the other thing is I thought just some of those ones were like you said, being grabby, get back in phase. Yeah. Get back in phase. Don't turn your head. Don't worry about making, I guess in that way, he probably wouldn't have made the pick 6 against USC if he didn't turn back there.
Right.
But make sure you get back in phase first, because I think that's part of the reason why he was getting cooked there. But anyways, we can move on. Sorry.
Yeah, and the USC one, but that's near the goal line, right? So that ball can't go over the top.
No, can't go much further.
And one last thing on this that you brought up is he gets aggressive on down and distance and stuff. In fairness to him, okay, the last play against Ohio State when he gets beat on the go ball, right? In fairness, Notre Dame calls a 0 coverage. It is unacceptable for him to give up a 10-yard anything for a first down. That's why they called the defense.
Yeah.
To get that ball out. And so, no, you cannot actually give up an in or an out or a curl or a slant on 3rd and 11 for a first down. That is unacceptable, right? Because again, that's why they called the defense.
Yeah.
And that we see that a lot with Christian Gray. Now, what a player will say in practice when they call the defense or they want you to, they're teaching you the coverage and how to cover it. He'll say, well, what if they run a go? I'm sitting on all this stuff. What are and they'll say, well, you got to do your best.
Yeah.
And that's why playing corner's hard against top players. So that's what that situation is. All right. The Salty Jazz 14. How good of a defensive coordinator is Marcus Freeman really?
It kind of does sound like, I know he came in here and said, it kind of does sound a little bit like a shot, or he didn't know, to be fair, I think it was Matthew Bolden who said it does. So now I know it's Matthew Bolden now, because I've seen you in here, Matthew. And maybe he didn't know, because I think for the people who were really into the program during when that hiring cycle, when Marcus Freeman got hired by, Notre Dame as defensive coordinator, he was a very coveted defensive coordinator. And I know he was a really good recruiter, and that was part of it, but that wasn't the main reason why he was hired as a thing. That was an additive piece. He was considered a rising star defensive coordinator because he had done a great job with Cincinnati's defense. They had a top 5 defense in all of college football.
Yeah.
His last year there, right? So even that, he wasn't there for 21 when they went to the playoff, but it was the defense was just as good the year before. They were great, right? And that was one of the things. And he was, obviously someone who did some of the, they tweaked some of that stuff with their their big dime package and all that kind of stuff. And they were very good the year before too. And then at Notre Dame, he was they were 13th in DF plus. His 1 year as coordinator at Notre Dame. So, and I would say too, that 21 defense in terms of talent, remember that Clarence Lewis led the team in snaps and then he ended up losing his starting job like a couple games into 2022. Like, that was not a team. They couldn't do a lot of the stuff that they do now.
Houston Griffith, you're starting next to Kyle Hamilton.
Yeah, they did not have talent-wise. That was, and then obviously they lost Marist at the in the preseason, who was expected to be like a huge part of it. JD Bertrand was, in his first year. He also was playing with like one arm for most of the year. Like, that was not a team that was set up well personnel-wise, and they still were top 15 in defense. So he's a pretty good coordinator.
Yeah. So is it reasonable? So given Chris Ash, is it reasonable to say they'll have a decently high floor given Freeman's background? Do you think he would start weighing in heavily if Ash falters? I think they have a decently high floor because of the talent.
Yeah.
And because the coaching staff around, like, I think Max Bull is really good. I think Al Washington's really good. We know Mike Mickens is very good. And Chris Ash himself is a good coach, right? And so I think that gives me I don't know that it has really much, like, my confidence in the defense doesn't have much to do with Marcus Freeman, his acumen as a defensive coordinator. It's just more of the ingredients that they have. It's just, it's hard.
The talent sets the floor.
Yeah. Yeah. And, Chris Ash, he's never turned a good defense into a bad one. That's never happened. So that, you gotta have confidence in that. Next question. Oh, this one, another one from the Salty Jazz. Do you think Traore will be back 100% next year? Mitch Evans didn't look himself in 2024, but his injury was like a month later into the season. This gives me hope. So what do you think about Traore? Are you concerned at all about any lack of explosiveness or anything like that given the injury?
I think we just don't know until you see it, right? Like, I think I do think one of the things with Mitchell Evans that was a little bit overblown was like how long it took him to get back, because I thought part of it was like he just aren't throwing the ball to him.
Yeah,
like you got to like start using him different, like where they were like basically throwing him like little like speed outs to the flat instead of like, let's target this guy over the middle and in the intermediate areas and let this guy cook a little bit like he was doing the year before. So I think that was part of it. He was probably a little bit more up to speed earlier than his numbers would have suggested.
It's like Jaden Greathouse had a slow start and he didn't have any kind of injury,
Yes. I mean, a lot of the passing game, I think, was the growth of Leonard and all that, and the offensive line and how much they could protect to get the ball down the field, all that too, right? So I think with Traore, you just don't know. And I think with any injury, you just don't know. Like, look at Leonard. I mentioned this, because I wrote about him in 6 Thoughts today too, is that some people think that like, anything that is projected, you just have to realize that it's all just like, it's just a best guess. Like it's estimate of when somebody will be back, because there's always different things that happen with people, whether it sets them back or guys do it forward. Like, there's going to be people like Adrian Peterson who, like, in the last game of the season, he tears his ACL. Next year, he's back for week 1 and like running for 200 yards or whatever the heck he was. He had like a monster season after he did that, right?
Yeah.
You don't know how some people are going to react, there. And also too, there's different severities of what, what it looks like. You just don't know. You don't know. And then obviously there's going to be some guys who come back and they push it too early and then they re-injure it again too. Like Riley Leonard, his thing obviously wasn't as serious, but like they didn't take Riley Leonard and think, hey, this guy's missing the spring because of his ankle, but he had something that was like with the surgery, it didn't go heal the way that he wanted. There was some stuff that got messed up there and they had to redo it. And you just don't know. So I think it's just a long ways away, and we'll just kind of see where he's at. I don't think like anyone should anticipate that him and Botello don't think that, hey, these guys aren't going to be ready for the start of the season, but also don't think that like these guys are going to be like non-factors this year too.
Yeah.
Just keep it open-ended, and then we'll see what we get into, when it's around summer. And that's when you're going to kind of have a better idea of it. Charles Jagusah out for the season, torn pec. Freaking comes back and he's like, blocking Penn State and Ohio State.
So don't panic, like you said, if there's any kind of a slow start, right? Like they can round into form, as we've seen players do in the past. You can get your small business or your social media page up to a fast start, Jamie, by going to VSR Media, founded by Notre Dame Football pregame host and Emmy award-winning anchor Vahid Sadrazadeh. VSR Media provides professional and cinematic video and photo. Whether you're looking for a collegiate or pro-level highlight reel, have a personal story to tell, or aiming to diversify and grow your business, VSR Media specializes in short and long-form video storytelling, social media management, and website design. VSR Media also captures professional headshots, senior, and sports photos. Contact them at vsrmediacompany.com. Mention Irish Sports Daily to receive 20% off your first project. Visit them online or give them a call at 574-800-9106. Next question from A.N.D. Rue. It seems that scouting high school players for college is categorically different than scouting college players for the NFL, projecting physical and mental maturation, evaluating players against wildly different levels of competition, and with mega differences in high school coaching. So we talked about this a little bit. And he's wondering, is he overthinking it, basically? And this is regarding Mike Martin coming over from the NFL. He's been a NFL scout for the last number of years, and there's concerns of people have concerns about can he evaluate high school prospects to college the same kind of way. We talked about this a little bit on Tuesday, but we can go a little bit more here.
Yeah. So I mean, I don't think it's overthinking it, because I think it's a question, like it's a valid question. But I'll go into kind of something that Mike Tomlin was on the Pivot podcast with Ryan Clark and those guys, and he was talking about how when he reads scouting reports, the thing he looks for and doesn't want to see is, obviously it matters like what a guy's like hand usage is for like a defensive lineman or whatever, but what matters more to a coach and those guys is like pedigree. Like, this guy has got this amount of long arms. He can do this. He can do that. What can he do? And because you can teach certain things, and there's some stuff that you can't be taught.
Yeah.
And from that sense, all you're looking at is everyone in the biggest adjustment from scouting NFL guys to scouting college football players is everybody's a ball of clay. Like, for the most part, there's very few guys that will come in and they are just like super intelligent, like football IQ already just like through the roof, that they are going to be at this. There's like 10 guys in a class maybe who kind of fit this profile of they have all this kind of stuff there where they're just so advanced. Most of the other guys, even most of the 5 stars, it's all based on traits.
Yeah.
Right. It's all based on traits. This guy is this weight. This was his time. This is whatever. This is what it looks like he's going to grow into. And there's all this stuff that's projectable that comes with it, that it's just like how testing markers matter for the NFL. Well, it matters for college too. It's just different because you're looking at guys at a different age. Right. But there's still a lot of things. That's why people use like track times. They use like throws into track. They use like, hey, this guy's got a background in wrestling. This guy's got, basketball background. Right. All these different things that they look at, that they think that like, hey, this can translate. And it's about whether or not you have the coaches who can develop these guys. Right. So Obviously, there's going to be some guys who are further along than others. And that makes it different because, yeah, you're going to get far less tape and there's going to be far less unknown of watching film. There's just not too many Jaden Greathouses out there. And what I mean by Greathouse is because Greathouse came from a pretty like advanced offense in high school, played against extremely tough competition, dominant player in Texas high school football, which is also one of those things where you're like, hey, if you gave him a bad, star ranking, you were probably an idiot, and no shots at those people, but yes, shots at those people because you're overthinking it.
Yeah.
Because you're looking at, that kind of thing. But there's just so few guys that fit that. So for the rest of the guys that don't do that, especially when you're looking at like, I'm getting this guy from this school and he only plays against this competition. Well, you're looking at size and traits and the way a guy moves and all of these kind of things. That's why you also want to get them in camp, see if they're coachable, get them in person, talk to them. Like we talked about the thing about like learning about like how much they're passionate about football and all these kind of things. And that stuff is all the exact same as you would do with scouting in the NFL. Yeah. So I think that's just the main thing that doesn't really change. And based on like what I've read about, Mike Martin and how he kind of views stuff too, and also how like the Detroit Lions view things too. It sounds like he already kind of thinks that way. He's not like just looking, and I don't want to say anything bad about like, I don't think like Howie Roseman, he's obviously, they just won a Super Bowl. He's done a good job, but let's be honest, it's pretty easy to just pick guys from Georgia, Yeah. You're like, this guy's a freak and he does this. It's like, yeah, okay. And you could say, hey, maybe some of these other people should have been smart enough to take the guy from Georgia. Yeah, probably, right? But also too, they can take those guys because they think, hey, we have the people who are going to develop these guys when they get here. So like Michael Williams, I definitely not a guy who lived up to 5-star hype in terms of his production. But if you've been paying attention, if you're someone like me who pays attention to like the NFL draft, like buzz and all that kind of stuff, he is getting a ton of buzz because they're like, this guy's traits are just through the roof. Like he's just so there. And someone is going to take him way higher than what matches his production because of the traits.
Yeah. And Notre Dame has a coaching staff that has shown that they can develop the traits. I mean, look, this is why Mike Mickens is known to be what he is, right? Because he knows what he wants. He knows what he's looking for. I can coach it. That's his mindset. I can coach this, but this is what I'm looking for. Look, they're all long. All the corners he likes, they're all long. They can all run. And they've got long arms, tall guys. This is what he wants, right? So, all right. This is Irish Nut. How many analysts do you think Notre Dame will add since they can now coach on the field? How far behind is Notre Dame in the support team than SEC teams? I think that I don't have really any concerns about this in terms of having support staff for Notre Dame in regards to SEC teams. I think that at some point there's a critical mass where you get a number where it's like you can have 100 guys. At some point you have, you either have too many or you have more than you need. And it's like, they're actually not even a value add anymore in terms of just having people. I don't see Notre Dame as, I think there was a time maybe like a decade ago where I felt like Notre Dame was vastly understaffed on that front. I think what Notre Dame needs is they need more like administrative type people. Yeah. In terms of recruiting and that sort of thing, and the general manager, where they're kind of sorting that out now. But that's kind of how I see it. Where are you at with this?
I totally agree. And I think that's one of the things where I couldn't agree more with what you just said about like adding too many guys, I think can be a bad thing.
Yeah.
I think it's, there is a point where you reach like too many cooks can just like kind of confuse things. And if adding guys that, especially too, like, although it sounds good to be like, hey, this guy's a really veteran guy that whatever, if that veteran guy doesn't have a relationship with other guys on the staff, or he might be like if this guy thinks, hey, I know more than this guy or whatever, like that's what causes dissension. That's what can like ruin a culture within a coaching staff and all that. So you got to be really careful. And that's why too, like I like, bringing in young guys who want to learn and who are good, but still like they want to learn and be part of something rather than thinking like, hey, I'm going to come in and like, I'm waiting for this person to take over, or I'm just waiting for my next head coaching job or whatever. Right. Like, I think it can be like, it's funny because, that's one thing with like Bill Belichick for years and years, he always had like the smallest coaching staff in the NFL. And part of it is because that guy just had so much control over everything that he could do it. But also too, he just had like a trust in the guys that he had on his staff that they could do the job. So, and it's more about that admin, like you said, and Matt has written about it a lot. Like one of the problems is like, it's great. That new building it's coming along, right? I don't know if you've seen some of the pictures people share, but like it's coming along, right? So that's great. But that is 10 years too late. It should have been done way before. The Goog is old. It doesn't have enough office space to fill all the staffing. And it's hard to add people when you don't have any place to put them. So I think that's, part of it is like you need more there. And obviously like personnel departments, NIL departments, all of this kind of stuff has just been building out. And it's way more of like the back end stuff of like college football, that kind of stuff is where Notre Dame needs to catch up a bit more with the SEC, and I wouldn't even say SEC. It's more of like just the top end stuff. But I don't think like, even if you look at it where Saban before had like this many guys and there was like this many analysts, you don't see that a lot from anybody else. If you look at like the staff list of like people, because I go and have to look at it when I'm looking at like candidates for, Notre Dame's coaching staff, I'm looking at who's where and whatever. They're not as big as you think. I think Saban kind of blew it up to a different point, and not many people are quite at that same level.
Yeah. We've talked a ton about proof of concept on this show, and I think like look at their results too.
Yeah.
Like if they were so far behind, like because you look at Ohio State, right? Like they were clearly the very best roster in college football, but it used to be, in my opinion, that there would be like multiple teams where it's like, man, if Notre Dame sees them, they're in big trouble. I think Ohio State was kind of the only team where it was like, man, I don't like this matchup's tough, and I think if they had played Texas, like I think it would have been a very close game, like a la Penn State or Georgia, I mean, anytime Notre Dame goes and like beats the SEC champions, like you have a good situation, and whatever they have in terms of their coaching staff and their roster and their program, like that's a good situation when you can beat them, especially like in the Sugar Bowl in Louisiana, like kind of in their territory kind of deal.
Yeah.
Like that to me is as proof of concept as you can have with what they're trying to do with their program. But like you said, it's the periphery stuff that they need to get better at, because not just because it gives tangible kind of difference on the field, but also because you can, and it doesn't take away from the mission of the university. And that's something that I never understood. It's like you want your guys to go to class and you want them to get degrees, and it's 4 years, and like you got to be on schedule, and you got to have you're taking real classes, you're taking real majors and all those other things. Fine, right? I didn't understand the dorm thing ever, because I was like, that doesn't take away from the mission of the university. Like having the best facilities does not take away from the mission of Notre Dame. And to me, like it never made sense for them to not be at the forefront of that. So, but I think they're, to their credit, it's late, but they're getting there, right? I do. They're not being completely stubborn about it. So
yeah,
that's a good thing. I believe this is the last question. Xer ND, assuming a number of starters get reps reduced due to the long past season, who do you think everyone will gush about in spring ball, even though they may not start come fall?
That's You know what? I was thinking about this one, and then I didn't have an answer at the time when I was looking at it. And then I was hoping that it would just come to me, but I really don't. I think this is kind of like the beauty of spring is that you just kind of don't know, who it might be. If I had to guess, if I'm going to guess like candidates, I think a good one would be, someone like a Logan Thomas or something like that, because he's not in a position where he's probably going to jump the line and all of a sudden become a starter, but he might all of a sudden just really look like, wow, he really like took a big jump. And then all of a sudden he's like a guy that people are like really, really excited about. I think so. There's him as like one of those kind of candidates, like a Bronte Johnson, who might not be there, but also might be someone who's like, wow, he's really like, kind of pushing, come along. And like, certainly I think like when we're talking about the offensive line and how good it can be, everybody's, mentioning, well, Gerby Lambert, obviously, well, Gerby Lambert should be this and whatever. I mean, no one was really talking about like Anthony Knapp last year, right? So I don't know that, say, someone, I mean, I'm not saying it's going to be these guys, but I'm just throwing them out as names that just could be whatever. What if like all of a sudden, because it's, the center position is open, all of a sudden you're like, well, Joe Otting, like, oh, like Joe Otting, like he's not going to start a center, but like he looks like he's a player, right? Like, and he's going to be someone like, or Styles Prescott or Sullivan Absher, because they've shifting stuff around there, right? Like, so I mean, I couldn't really like nail down to say, hey, this is like, I feel super confident that this is going to be a guy like one of those young receivers that we've talked about a bunch, like, where it might seem easy to say like Micah Gilbert, Logan Saldate, right? And I think even Cam Williams seems like almost too obvious because of the ranking he came in with and all that too. But like there's always going to be somebody so this is a good question, but I just don't know kind of what it's going to lead to, other than like Kedron Young seems like the most obvious pick, because those backs, I just think they're going to protect those guys and whatever. Right. So he just seems like the most obvious, but those other guys I think are good candidates.
Right. I think Micah Gilbert is mine. I think people are going to be excited about him, and he's not going to start because
of Fields.
They have because of Fields, and then because of Faison and or Greathouse, right? Like they have guys who are proven in high leverage college football games that they're going to put out there. So I would say Micah Gilbert, and then I would say I'll say Madden Framo. I think he's going to be like KVA, where it's like, man, I don't know where he fits on a game to game basis, but they're going to put him on the field. He's going to be good. That's where I'm at.
Super excited about Madden Framo, and I just think that he's got a chance to be exceptional. And I do think he's like one of these guys who's going to be more advanced than a lot of other freshmen that come in. I just wanted to hit, because I think, first of all, Matthew Bolton, does he have multiple YouTube accounts? Because he's got two nights. Because I thought he had a different one before. But because, he brought up with the context in terms of what he was trying to ask about the Freeman Ash thing. I think his context of the Jay Bateman thing compared to, Chris Ash this year. Yeah. So this is what he's saying. So, Jay Bateman was Texas A&M's defense corner. We heard from Irish media last time that Elko would still be involved in the defense. One media even called it still Elko's defense. I mean, I think it was me, but maybe other people called it still Elko's defense too. I mean, it was his defense, right? So the thing is that Jay Bateman was like a guy who was very close friends with. He's very close friends with Mike Elko. And just kind of like how Tyler Santucci, one of the reasons why Tyler Santucci didn't go to Texas A&M and went to Georgia Tech, because then it was like, well, now he gets to run his defense at Georgia Tech rather than be Elko's guy. He can just do his own thing. Ash isn't Mickens' guy, or not Freeman's guy. If Mickens was this pick, that would make a lot more sense.
I was going to say, if Marcus was interested in this, he would have gone with Mickens as DC.
Yeah. So, and it wasn't Freeman's defense. It was Golden's defense. And I think you hire Ash. Well, I don't think you hire Ash. I know he hired Ash to run Chris Ash's defense.
Yeah.
Obviously, there's going to be pieces there. A foundation is built from what they have from Al Golden's defense. I don't think Chris Ash is coming in expecting to shake that foundation. But like you said, Greg, before, one of the things Ash has been known for is to like make defenses better.
Yeah.
So we'll see. I mean, it's going to be tough to be better than a top 3 defense. But I mean, I think the whole thing is you want someone to be at that same level, and I think that's entirely possible.
It's entirely possible, but we'll monitor throughout the spring, and we'll read the tea leaves and things of that nature. And look, we'll see, right? We can ask Marcus Freeman about how he feels about it, and his involvement and things of that nature. So it's a good query, good question there from Matthew Bolden. All right, we're done. That's all the questions. So we're going to end it there. Thank you everyone for tuning in. If you like what you heard, please hit the like, please hit subscribe, please hit the notification bell. So whenever it is, we are going to go live. We are next scheduled to be live on Monday with Mike and Jamie for Power Hour, and then we'll be back on Tuesday with Hit and Hustle. So you're going to want to subscribe to our channel. We got a lot of fun stuff coming up. All right, have a good weekend, everyone. We'll talk to you soon. Keep hitting and hustling.